The first time Nurse Nolan Fray met the alien pilot, it was 3 in the morning, and the pilot was bleeding out on the floor of Bay 6 with 3 fractured ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and a head wound that wouldn't stop dripping green. "Move," Nolan said, shoving the crash cart beside the gurney. "He's still conscious." "He was until you walked in," whispered Lieutenant Vega, already stepping back as if the very presence of the alien made her nervous. "He's difficult." The pilot, a tall, armor-plated creature with mottled blue skin and 2 wide-set eyes that blinked independently, opened his mouth and coughed a sound that was half laugh, half choke. "I expected more than a soft, fleshed earthling with gauze and tape," the alien croaked in surprisingly fluent English. Nolan didn't look up from the wound he was trying to seal. "You expected someone else to fix your airlock stunt," the pilot hissed, probably in pain, which Nolan took as progress. He pressed a dermal sealer over the worst of the lacerations and reached for the scanner. "I expected a surgeon," the pilot muttered. "Not a, what do you call it?" "Nurse." Nolan lowered the scanner slowly. He wasn't angry, not exactly, but the room went a little quieter. "I'm the one keeping your insides inside you right now," Nolan said. "You want to joke about titles, save it for later. Maybe after you've got a pulse above 40. The pilot tilted his head, watching Nolan's gloved hands move with practiced efficiency. "You're offended?" "No," Nolan said. "I'm tired. I've been on shift for 18 hours. And I don't like wasting time explaining basic triage to someone who can't lift his own arm." The alien exhaled a strange, whistling breath. "Your people are fragile, and yet you act as if you're not." Nolan finished sealing the wound and looked the pilot in the eye. "You're the one bleeding on my floor." That should have been the end of it. A tense moment, a bit of interspecies friction, patched up with enough gauze and morphine to make the alien forget, if not forgive. But 30 hours later, the pilot was still in Recovery 3, and the story had passed through half the station like wildfire. Nolan heard it again from Lieutenant Vega at the vending unit. "He called you a gauze monkey," she said, biting into something that might have been a protein bar. "In front of Commander Harrow. Apparently he thinks nurses are just, well, not much more than domestics." Nolan rubbed his eyes. "Why is he still here?" "Because he's grounded until the shuttle's fixed. And the Alliance won't transfer him off station until he's cleared for flight." Nolan took a breath. "Great." He told himself he didn't care. He told himself things like this happened. You patch someone up, they say something stupid, you move on. But that night, when he walked into Recovery 3 with a chart in his hand, the pilot was sitting up, already sneering. "Ah, the dressing boy returns." "Right," Nolan said, scanning the vitals without responding. "Pain level? I'm surrounded by incompetent bipeds." "That's what hurts." "Good," Nolan muttered, still alert. The pilot leaned forward slightly, the heavy musculature in his chest straining against the bandages. "I flew through a meteor field during the Sarin siege. I've been shot down twice. I've stitched my own leg mid-atmosphere." "You think your tiny healers impress me?" Nolan paused. "You stitched your own leg mid-flight?" "Yes, cool. I once had to hold a guy's intestines inside his abdomen for 22 minutes while another nurse ran for the surgeon in a hallway during a power failure." The pilot blinked. "Oh," Nolan added, "and he lived." They stared at each other for a moment. Then the pilot lay back slowly, muttering something in his own language. From that moment on, things got worse. The pilot, whose name was Threx, made it a point to mock the human staff whenever they entered his room. He questioned their education, their strength, even the efficiency of their tools. It wasn't just annoying, it was disruptive. Especially when Threx began refusing treatment from anyone except Nolan, claiming Nolan was the only one who hides his weaknesses well. Commander Harrow summoned Nolan to his office after the 3rd incident. "I need you to fix this," Harrow said, arms crossed. "He's not leaving for another 5 days, and he's making the entire medical wing unstable." Nolan sat down, tired beyond measure. "You want me to babysit the guy who keeps calling me a glorified towel jockey. I want you to get through to him. Use your bedside manner." Nolan stared. The next morning, he entered Recovery 3 with a tray of instruments and a plan. "You're due for mobility tests," he said. Threx looked suspicious. "Tests? Yeah, you want to fly again, you need to show you can move without your shoulder dislocating. I'll walk you through it." The mobility test took 45 minutes. Threx failed every checkpoint. "You're weak," Nolan said after the third fall. Threx growled. "Your test is flawed." "No," Nolan said, "your shoulder's not ready. You're pushing it too fast." "I've recovered from worse," Threx barked. "That's not the point," Nolan said. "You recover wrong, you don't recover at all." Threx glared, but Nolan didn't back down. He pointed to the monitor. "You've got inflammation in the joint and your range of motion's off by 20 degrees. You fly like this and you're going to rip it out of socket mid-turn." Threx looked at the numbers. "You're sure?" "Yes," Nolan said. "And if you'd let me finish before calling me a towel monkey, maybe we'd be ahead right now." Threx didn't speak for a solid minute. "I thought human nurses just followed orders." "Well," Nolan said, "you thought wrong." He handed Threx a cold compress and left without waiting for a reply. That night, someone left a tray of alien rations outside the medical wing labeled "For the healer who does not cringe." Nolan didn't smile, but he took the tray. 3 days later, Threx stumbled into the medbay hallway unaccompanied, his shoulder visibly sagging. "Are you kidding me?" Nolan caught him before he hit the wall. "I told you not to, I was testing the limits," Threx muttered. Nolan helped him back to Recovery 3. "Congratulations, you found them." The shoulder was worse than before. Nolan ordered another scan and the results weren't good. "You pulled it again," he said. "You're grounded for another week. I have to leave in 5 days. Nolan tossed the chart on the counter. "Then you better start listening." Threx didn't argue. The next few days passed with the kind of grudging cooperation Nolan knew came from pain more than humility. Threx let Nolan work on the joint. He followed the exercises. He even stopped insulting the junior staff. Mostly. But then came the night of the breach. An airlock seal malfunctioned during a cargo drop, cracking open the corridor between sections B and C. The emergency systems kicked in, but not before 2 engineers were injured. One of them, a girl barely 20, had a compound fracture in her leg and severe lacerations across her side. Nolan was in the trauma bay when they brought her in, blood soaked through the temporary seal on her leg. "Get me a scan," he ordered. "I need to see if the femur's fractured." "It's broken," whispered the engineer who dragged her in. "I heard it snap." "I'm not guessing," Nolan said. "Scan first." The tech scrambled. Nolan worked fast. The girl was in shock, her breathing shallow. "Stay with me," he said. She blinked. "Hurts?" "I know, we're going to fix it." The scan came back. Complete femoral fracture displaced. Nolan ordered a sedative and prepped for traction. He didn't notice Threx standing in the doorway until 20 minutes later, silent, watching. Later, after the girl was stable and moved to post-op, Threx approached Nolan in the staff lounge. "You didn't hesitate," he said. "No," Nolan said. "That's kind of the job. She would have died without you, maybe, but she didn't." Threx stared at the floor. "I mocked you." "Yeah, I was wrong," Nolan nodded. "Yeah," Threx looked up. "You're not weak." "I never said I was." Threx straightened. "When I fly again, I will tell the command that your kind are not what I thought." "Thanks," Nolan said, "but maybe don't lead with 'they're not all gauze monkeys.'" Threx grunted. "Noted." He left the next day, shoulder still stiff but cleared for light-duty flight. A week later, Nolan received a letter, an actual, printed letter from the Galactic Command's liaison office. It read, "Medical Officer Nolan Fray, per the recommendation of Alliance pilot Threx, you are hereby invited to observe trauma response procedures aboard the flagship Varnak during its next medical relief rotation. Your demonstrated expertise and resilience under pressure have been noted as exceptional. Regards, Commander Sev Halden." Nolan folded the letter and slid it into his locker. He didn't smile. But he stayed late that night, checking the vitals of every patient in recovery, just to be sure. 2 weeks after Threx left the station, Nolan found himself wrist-deep in a badly infected wound on a Jelvathi diplomat who refused anesthesia on cultural grounds, and kept trying to narrate his entire family lineage during the procedure. "I need you to stay still," Nolan said, gripping the forceps tighter. "Or this thing's going to tunnel all the way through your abdominal wall. Do not interrupt," the Jelvathi rasped. "I am at the part where my third maternal uncle, either you let me finish without talking, or you'll be telling your lineage to the morgue." The Jelvathi gave a gurgling grunt that might have been an attempt at silence. Nolan worked faster. The infection had already started breaking down the surrounding tissue, and the smell was enough to make one of the junior medics gag and bolt from the room. Nolan didn't flinch. He dealt with worse. Half an hour later, the diplomat was patched, packed, and under observation. Nolan peeled off his gloves, washed up, and went to check the system logs for incoming transfers. He didn't expect to see a flagged file tagged Varnak class authorization. He paused, tapped the file open, and read the header. "Incoming. Varnak Medical Relief Vessel Docking Clearance Granted Personnel Transfer. Commander Sev Halden, Chief Medical Officer Varnak, requesting temporary assignment for cross-species trauma observation." Attached to the request was a footnote. Per suggestion of pilot Threx, Nurse Nolan Fray has been listed as point liaison for human medical protocol orientation. Please prepare accordingly. Nolan blinked at the screen. Then he leaned back and exhaled through his nose. Of course. He went to the docking bay the next morning. The Varnak wasn't subtle. It looked more like a floating fortress than a medical ship's sleek black plating, no visible windows, and a docking ramp that extended like the tongue of a particularly judgmental beast. Two figures descended. One was tall and narrow, with pale skin stretched tightly over a vaguely insectoid frame. The other was a broad-shouldered humanoid with skin like slate and a cluster of metallic nodes along his jawline. Nolan stepped forward. "Welcome to Station Kappa 4. You are Fray?" the insectoid asked. "Nurse Nolan Fray, you must be Commander Halden." "No," the creature said, antennae twitching slightly. "I am Veth R, assistant to Commander Halden. He is currently recalibrating his lungs." Nolan blinked. "What? Your oxygen mix is suboptimal." "He finds it itchy." Before Nolan could respond, the broader figure approached, eyes scanning Nolan top to bottom like he was evaluating a screwdriver. "You're the one Threx wouldn't shut up about," he said. "Hopefully in a good way," Nolan said. The commander tilted his head. "He said you insulted his intelligence, disrespected his status, and ignored his combat record." Nolan didn't answer, then Halden grinned. "He also said you saved his career." "Ah," Nolan said. "There it is." They walked together toward the medical wing. Halden watched the walls with quiet interest. "This station's small," he noted. "It's enough," Nolan said. "We handle about 30 cases a day, mostly minor trauma, quarantine checks, and occasional evac overflow." "Do you conduct field drills?" "Weekly." "We do paired simulations every 10 days. "Real-time triage once a month." Halden nodded. "Good. I like environments that don't pretend peace is permanent." They arrived at the main medbay, where one of the human techs nearly dropped a container when she saw the visitors. "Try not to spook anyone," Nolan said under his breath. Halden didn't answer. He walked straight to the nearest trauma station and examined the supply drawer without asking. "You have no automated sterility confirmation." "Manual checks," Nolan said. "Fastest way to catch contamination is with your own eyes." Halden turned. "You trust your senses over instruments." "I trust both. But when it's someone's life in your hands, I don't wait for a machine to tell me what I can already see." Halden blinked slowly. "I see why Threx found you irritating." Nolan shrugged. "He lived." That seemed to satisfy the commander more than any compliment. He spent most of the morning observing without speaking. Occasionally, he asked pointed questions why humans used layered sutures instead of regenerative mesh, why they preferred rapid compression bandages over dermal sealers in heavy bleeds, why they didn't sedate during certain procedures even when the patient was conscious. Because sedation slows clotting, Nolan said, fixing a wrap over a bruised thorax. And we don't always have blood on hand for everyone, so we minimize risk. And pain, we manage it. But we don't pretend it doesn't exist. Halden watched Nolan finish the dressing, then asked, "How often do you lose patients?" "Too often, but not as often as we used to." Later that afternoon, a distress signal rerouted to the station's emergency channel. A mining rig on a nearby asteroid had suffered a structural collapse. The Varnax shuttle was already en route with recovery drones, but the station's medbay was closest for initial treatment. Nolan didn't have to be told. He was already in the trauma bay when the first casualty came in an Adari male, half his face crushed under debris, breathing ragged through a collapsed lung. "Get the thoracostomy tray," Nolan ordered. "We need negative pressure relief now." Halden stepped forward. "You'll perform it manually. We don't have Adari-compatible chest tubes. We adapt." Nolan made the incision just below the ribline, careful to avoid the lateral vessels. The hiss of trapped air escaping told him he'd hit the right spot. The Adari's breathing eased slightly. Not enough. Nolan grabbed the improvised valve and inserted it, stabilizing the pressure. Halden handed him the next instrument without needing to be asked. "Where did you learn Adari thoracic anatomy?" he asked. 12 cases ago. One of them coded. "I studied the scans after." The next patient had a shattered femur and a dislocated hip. The last was barely conscious, with burns across most of his dorsal skin. Nolan moved from table to table, calling out instructions, adjusting doses, calculating fluid replacements from memory. Halden observed everything. By the time the last patient was stabilized, Nolan's scrubs were soaked at the cuffs, and he hadn't eaten in over 12 hours. Halden approached as Nolan rinsed his hands. "You operate under conditions that would be considered unacceptable aboard the Varnak." "Yeah, well, we don't usually have luxury." "And yet your survival rate is over 90%. Nolan dried his hands. "I don't aim for 90. I aim for all of them." Halden looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at Nolan. "I would like to request a procedural exchange. You teach my staff your emergency protocols. In return, we will show you what the Varnak uses for long-term trauma stabilization." "Deal," Nolan said without hesitation. "And one more thing." Halden reached into a compartment at his hip and handed Nolan a sealed data rod. "Threx sent this. Said you'd know what to do with it." Nolan turned the rod over. It was labeled in Threx's angular script, for the one who did not flinch. He didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he walked back into the trauma bay and started rechecking the vitals of the burn victim. Halden watched him for a few seconds longer, then turned and left without another word. Outside, the station's artificial lights dimmed to simulate evening. Nolan didn't notice. He leaned over the monitor, adjusted the fluid intake, and moved on to the next bed. He didn't flinch. By the time the second wave of evacuees arrived from the asteroid rig, the medical wing had converted its diagnostic lab into a temporary triage overflow. They were running low on saline, but Nolan wasn't worried yet. Most of the miners had superficial injuries, minor fractures, contusions, a couple of shallow burns. Manageable. Only one was different. He was carried in by two of the Varnak's auxiliary medics, both wearing insulated gauntlets. The patient's skin was a translucent amber tone and his limbs were too long for a standard gurney. His eyes were sealed shut and the left side of his torso was caved in. "He's Kari," one of the medics said. "Name's Edel." Collapsed ventilation shaft caught him chest first. He stopped responding mid-extraction. "Why the gloves?" Nolan asked, moving to assess him. "Subdermal toxin glands, dormant unless he's in distress." Nolan crouched beside the gurney and checked for a pulse at the carotid equivalent. "Nothing, he's coding," he said. "Get me the thoracic access tray and a cardiac stim." The auxiliary medic hesitated. "We're not certified for Kari anatomy." "I am," Nolan said. "Back off unless you've got something useful." He slid the scanner under Edel's back. The thoracic cavity had partially collapsed, and the heart wasn't contracting, it was fluttering, ineffective. Nolan grabbed the stim injector and aligned it to the Kari's central nerve node just beneath the third rib. The injector clicked once, twice, and then Edel's spine jolted. "Come on," a faint, staggered pulse registered on the monitor. The heart was moving barely. "Respiratory support," Nolan called. "He's got gill folds under the scapula. Use the oxygen exchange ports, not the mask." A junior nurse stared, confused. "Lower back," he snapped. "The ridged slits." "That's where he breathes," the nurse scrambled. Nolan kept pressure on the ribline to stabilize the internal cavity. The toxin glands were activating, his gloves were starting to discolor. "He's reacting to the pain," one of the Varnak medics said quietly. "I know," Nolan said. "I'm not stopping." He adjusted the stim settings and pressed again. Edel's eyes fluttered open, dark, glassy, unfocused, and then closed again. The pulse was climbing. Nolan exhaled through his teeth. "Stabilize him. Start fluid replacement with the Y group plasma. And someone clean up this tray, it's a mess." Commander Halden appeared in the doorway seconds later. "You revived a Kari without a containment field. Didn't have time," Nolan said, stripping off the gloves. "He'll live. He could have paralyzed you." "Yeah," Nolan said. "He didn't." Halden watched the monitors. Edel's vitals were steady. "Your pulse is elevated," he said, "because I ran across the wing and jammed a needle into a toxin-producing alien before breakfast." Halden made a sound that could have been approval. "My team is reviewing your trauma protocols. There are inconsistencies, but none that result in fatalities." "High praise," Nolan said, wiping his hands. "Your improvisation is reckless but effective." "It's not improvisation," Nolan said. "It's adaptation." Halden tilted his head. "You distinguish the two. Improvisation's guessing. Adaptation is knowing the rules and bending them just enough to survive. Interesting." Edel groaned softly. Nolan moved to his side and adjusted the oxygen output. "Don't try to speak yet," he said. "You took a bad hit." Edel didn't respond, but his toxin glands stopped secreting. A good sign. Halden folded his arms. Threx was right. "I'm not interested in being right," Nolan said. "I'm interested in keeping people breathing." That afternoon, Halden requested a private meeting in the conference module adjacent to the hydroponics bay, the only part of the station quiet enough to hold a conversation without being interrupted by alarms or stretchers. Nolan arrived to find a table already laid out with 2 sealed packs and a projection unit. "What's this?" he asked. "Instructional exchange," Halden said. "I want your emergency response methods documented. In return, I'll give you access to the Varnak's Trauma Stabilization Archive." Nolan sat down. "You're serious?" "My crew is competent," Halden said. "But they've never had to perform a thoracic decompression with a cauterizing blade and 0 prep time." "Most people haven't," Nolan said, opening the first pack. "You want the real version or the one with checklists and ideal conditions?" "The real one." Nolan leaned back. "Okay. You're in an unstable transport bay. One patient's hemorrhaging from a pelvic fracture, another's seizing from hypoxia. You've got 1 trauma kit and 90 seconds before the power cuts." Halden's eyes narrowed slightly. "Go on." They ran through scenarios for nearly an hour. Halden took copious notes. He didn't interrupt. Occasionally, he asked for clarification on things like why humans placed IVs in veins instead of subdermal reservoirs, or how they determined triage priority without neural baseline readings. "You rely on visual cues," he said, "and instincts. You learn to read skin tone, pupil response, breathing patterns. You don't need a scanner to know when someone's about to crash. You do all this without neural augmentation. Because we have to." Halden sat back. "Your limitations are your strength." Nolan didn't answer. That evening, Nolan returned to the medbay. Edel was awake, weak but coherent. The toxin levels had dropped and he could speak in short bursts, though his voice sounded like wind through gravel. "You knew what I was," he said. "Yeah, you touched me anyway. You were dying." Edel blinked slowly. Most wouldn't risk it. I'm not most. Edel nodded once. Then I owe you. No, Nolan said. You owe someone else the same chance next time. Edel considered that. I will remember. By the next rotation, the last of the miners had been discharged or transferred. The diagnostic lab was cleaned and converted back. Supplies were restocked. The medbay went quiet again, as quiet as it ever got. Halden approached Nolan near the observation deck, where the stars outside looked like frozen static. My crew leaves in 1 cycle, he said. I've uploaded the full archive to your system. Nolan nodded. I'll send you the last batch of protocols by morning. There is one more thing. Halden reached into his coat and produced a small case. Inside was a medallion silver, engraved with the Varnak's insignia. Recognition of adaptive excellence, he said. It's rarely given to non-Alliance personnel. I'm not Alliance, no, Halden said, but you make the rest of us look slow. Nolan took the medallion. It was heavier than it looked. I don't need a medal, he said. Maybe not, Halden said. But now every species who sees that will know one thing. What's that? That humans don't need augmentations, gene stacks, or combat ranks to terrify the rest of us. Nolan looked at the stars. Good. When Halden and his crew departed, the station felt a little less crowded. Nolan returned to his rounds just as he always did. The next morning, a new cadet in medical orientation approached him nervously. Are you the one who revived Akari with bare hands? Nolan didn't look up from the chart he was reviewing. No, he said. I'm the one who made sure he stayed alive after. The cadet blinked. Oh, hand me that chart on the left, Nolan said, and if you want to help, stop gawking and start learning. The cadet snapped to attention. Nolan smiled just a little and went back to work. Everything was quiet again. Exactly the way he liked it.